Hey guys, today's Whispery History is going to be unscripted because you know what? I want you to hear the true emotion in my voice when I talk about this loving couple that I'm going to tell you about. Some of you may know that I have a soft spot for historical romances because of course I do, right? Of course I do. Look at me, right? I also have quite a fondness for little feathered creatures. Go figure. I love birds. And this past week I was looking up a few birds. Birds that are kept commonly as pets in America and the United States. I stumbled across one that is a really common bird that I've seen a lot of. Beautiful little thing, red and gold and purple and little black stripes on it, and blue. It's a little rainbow of a bird that was very popular in pet shops throughout most of my life and still is. And I kind of wondered where it got its name from. It occurred to me to wonder where it got its name from, and I looked up the story. It got the sweetest, most charming story about a man who's straight out of a Victorian romance, right? I mean, this is a guy who started off in life as a lowly gardener's son, right? Just a gardener's son, growing up in Victorian, early, actually he was born Regency era, but early 1800s, and he took after his father. His father was a gardener. He became a gardener. As he grew older, he became more successful. He moved to a bigger garden in a bigger manor with more land. And as he did, he took an interest in the nature around him, the animals and the birds, and especially the birds. He was living in an era when people were more connected to the world around them, the natural world around them, obviously, and especially as being a gardener, kind of a groundskeeper, he was very in touch with the animals that were on the land, and he developed a hobby that would serve him very well in life. He became a taxidermist, which today, might set off a little bit of alarm bells for some people, but it was a different era, Like I said, people were far more in touch with the food that they ate and where it came from, and with life and death all around them anyway. So it wasn't going to be as kind of ick as we see it today. And frankly, the people everyone I've ever met who is a taxidermist or is interested in taxidermy has a very similar motivation as this guy. He was motivated because he was interested in the animals. He was interested in zoology. He was interested in the miracle of life, right? And how there is something very beautiful about the mechanics of a human body or an animal's body. It's just something beautiful. And so he became a taxidermist, and he became a good taxidermist. He ended up moving to London, setting up shop there, and getting out of the gardening business. Not only did he become a good taxidermist, but he really studied and learned the difference between the birds and the animals that he was preserving. He became really well informed. He became the very first curator and preserver for the London Zoological Society. And through that, he ended up being even more interested and even more knowledgeable, with having people bring him specimens from all over the world now. This guy was able to look at a bird and go, oh, well, that is like this bird, and it's similar to that bird, and it must have this adaptation because of that. He could tell you which birds were most closely related and what adaptations. Now, along the way, around this time, he meets a young woman who is living as a governess. She's a middle-class woman who was given a middle-class upbringing. She learned how to write. She learned how to sketch. She learned how to do watercolors, and she was a good little artist. But she was also lonely as a governess. Governesses at the time were sort of neither friend nor family, neither staff nor family. They lived in this middle ground where the only connection they had usually was the children that they watched over, because they were middle class, so they wouldn't be with the servants, but they also weren't family, so they wouldn't eat with them. They would eat with the children. They were socially in the middle of anything. Just sort of, it was a lonely existence, and she felt it. That's when she met him. And she looked at some of his sketches of these birds that he was making. She's like, I might be able to help you with that. She resketches some of the birds he'd drawn, and she paints them, and they end up getting married. In those early days, she even sells some of her watercolors and sketches in order to help make some extra money, while he is studying nature, becoming a professional ornithologist, a professional scientist of birds and study of birds. And it's through this work that they are recruited by Charles Darwin, who is at that time in the Galapagos, and he's got an idea about the nature of nature. He starts sending back samples of birds because he knows that he's not an ornithologist, but he knows who is. He sends it back to this guy, John Gould. Did I even mention his name? This is why working without a script doesn't work for me. John Gould. He sends it to John Gould and his wife, Elizabeth Coxon Gould. And John is able to say, oh, yeah, this bird here is a finch. And it's a little different because its beak is softer. This one has a beak that's longer and hooked at the end so that it can probably so that it can get insects. And that's how Charles Darwin pieced together the idea of adaptation to environment. It was with John Gould's input and with Elizabeth Gould's illustrations that he published The Origin of Species. These two helped him unlock the key. You don't unlock the key. You unlock the lock. These two had... I need a script, but it's okay, because honestly, I'm just going to roll with it. So, with this in mind, John Gould decides he's going to publish a book too. He's publishing The Birds of Europe first. And he has his wife illustrating almost all of the lithographs. She learns how to do lithographs in order to do this, making little color swatch plates so that the prints come out the right color and the right depth of colors. And her illustrations are beautiful. This is close to the time that in America John Audubon is doing something similar with Birds of America, Birds of Washington. He's another interesting story. He also started from sort of lowly beginnings and self-taught. That's the big difference. John Audubon was not as good of an artist, I don't think, but he was self-taught, so there's that. So he had a natural talent and an interest in birds. But Elizabeth Coxon Gould, she showed a depth of color that was not seen in Audubon's. If you think about old images of, Victorian watercolor birds, there's a good chance you're picturing Lady Elizabeth, not lady, she wasn't a lady, Elizabeth Coxon Gould's work. That book, Birds of Europe, helps start bird watching as a pastime in Europe. It was John Gould's information and his knowledge that helped classify the birds and talk about how you can tell one from another. But let's face it, you buy a book like that, you're looking at the pictures, right? Whatever the text next to the picture is telling you what the picture is, you're looking at the pictures. That book was a big portion of her baby, and she really did help influence not only The Origin of Species by Charles Darwin, but also bird lovers and bird watching as a hobby that was in Europe and translated to American, now one of the most common hobbies listed. So, impactful woman, impressive couple. And he did give her credit, which was not common for a lot of women. Women didn't have a lot of opportunities like that at the time, and if they did have opportunities like that, a lot of times they would have to be published under a man's name, or a man would take credit for their work. And in all honesty, there are things that we now know were published under his name that were credited to him that were absolutely her watercolors and her lithographs. There's a world of difference between his ability to draw and her ability to do watercolor and lithographs, and so it's absolutely her work that got credited to him. But he did in his books make sure to credit his wife. And they loved each other dearly. They clearly loved each other dearly. They had 8 kids together. My God. They loved each other dearly, but he wanted to go to Australia because he'd heard about the wild diversity of birds in Australia. She wrote to him while he was gone, but she missed him. And then on his next voyage out, she wanted to go with him. She didn't want to be without him again. She kissed 3 of her 5 kids goodbye. It was 4 of her 5 kids goodbye. Took the 7-year-old. Can you imagine? What a Victorian middle class thing to do, to just fuck off to another continent and only take one of your kids. Leave the rest with the governess and with family. But she did. She left her kids, took the 7-year-old, and they all went to Australia, where she had yet another baby. And then she had yet another baby. In the meantime, he is cataloging and collecting all of these birds. At one point, she despaired of the number of birds that he had collected, because when I say collected, I mean they were killed in order to collect them. So she once said that he has already shown himself a great enemy of the feathered tribe. Her works, her written works, her letters back and forth between England and Europe, England and Australia, it show her to be a very charming, witty, intelligent woman. They were lost for about 100 years. They were discovered in the 1930s, and in the 40s a book was published about her, finally, bringing to light all of her contributions to all of this work, because previously John Gould was the one who got the credit. John Gould was the one who anybody heard of and knew as the ornithologist, and so yeah, she had her name in credits and in the books and on the lithographs, but not a lot of credit was given to women at the time. They talked about the men. So we didn't know for a long time just how much of her work went into all of these books. After some time giving birth to 2 more children in Australia, making her grand total up to 8. I know that I said that they left 4 or 5 behind, but they had a few who did not survive, sadly, because it was the Victorian era. Frankly, it's amazing that they had that many kids at all. So she gave birth to their 7th and 8th child, and her letters home show that she missed her kids. She missed her kids a lot. So back to England they go. And John went with her because he loved her. He didn't want to be away from her, and she didn't want to be away from him. Sadly, they only had a year together after they got back to England, because eight kids takes a toll on a woman's body, especially in an era where they don't have the best medical treatment, and she died less than a year of puerperal fever. She was just 37 years old, and she was beautiful. She had, in the 11 years they were together, she had contributed about 650 lithographs alone to his work, and she would continue to be published in his next books. In his later books, he spoke of her at the close of his book, The Birds of Europe. He said that at the conclusion, at the Birds of Europe, at the conclusion of Birds of Australia, he said that at the conclusion of my Birds of Europe, I had the pleasing duty of stating that nearly the whole of the plates had been lithographed by my amiable wife. Would that I had the happiness of recording a similar statement with regard to the previous work, but such, alas, is not the case. It having pleased the all-wise disposer of events to remove her from this sublunary world within 1 short year after our return from Australia. During her sojourn in which country, an immense mass of drawings, both ornithological and botanical, were made by her inimitable hand and pencil. He had to replace her as an artist and an illustrator for his next books. But he never replaced her. He never remarried. He spoke lovingly of her for the rest of his life. Over the next 4 decades, he published many collections and built this reputation that, this legacy that went on without her. But he never forgot her. While she was still alive, one of his assistants had once named a sunbird after her. Mrs. Gould's sunbird. A beautiful thing, red and yellow. Worthy of being named after such a beautiful woman. And John Gould certainly could do no less, right? One of the most famous birds that he named, something that has been popular in pet shops across Europe and America for its bright colors and its sweet little cheep and its hardiness, its ease to take care of. A very popular little bird was named after her. He named the bird after her and called it the Gould's finch. Gould's finch. I couldn't even freaking say it. He named a bird after her and he can't. Guys. He named it the fucking Gould's finch. After her, right? After her. Not the Elizabeth Finch. Not the Coxon Goldfinch, not the Lady Goldfinch, not the My Wife Gold, not the Hey Betsy Finch. No, not the mother of my 8 frickin' children Finch. No, he names it the Gould Finch. He dedicates a fucking finch to the woman that he fucking loves, and he gives it his own name. How is that dedicating? How is that naming it after her? Oh my God, guys. I hate Victorian men. He was so close. He was so close to being a real life romantic figure, and then he goes and does that bullshit. Yeah, thank you for listening to another Whispery History. I just can't. Fucking Goulding fish. Oh, you know what? No, you may now know it. If you've ever heard it, if you've ever seen it in a pet shop, you may now know that it is the Lady Gouldian fish. Finch. You know what? Nothing to do with him. It came 100 years after, when other people were like, oh, hey, there's this chick who did all this work. She should be honored. Wait. You mean she was honored? No. Really? How? Oh, that's not okay. No, we're going to start calling it the Lady Gould Finch. Motherfucker.